Hello everyone, my name is Derek Nakawa, and today I will be discussing with you the environmental effects of offshore oil and natural gas extraction. And now when I mention offshore oil and natural gas extraction, I particularly mean sort of like from those large, tall oil rigs, which as they are colloquially known as, which you may find off the shores of oil-rich areas, such as in the Gulf of Mexico, and they are very tall. In fact, you may find that some oil rigs can extend to the heights of approximately the skyline of New York. They are definitely very tall, and as such, they are substantial buildings, structures in themselves. And well, the effects that these oil rigs and what they do actually has a positive effect on our environment. That is my claim, that the offshore oil and natural gas extraction has a positive effect on the environment. And the environment, in this case, I'm referring to the entire Earth's biosphere, which encompasses mainly the ocean and the atmosphere. Those will be the realm of my discussion here. And to support this claim, I will be discussing the effects that offshore oil drilling and natural gas extraction has on our oceans and our atmosphere, as I mentioned earlier. The platforms themselves, they have a positive effect on the ecosystems of the shorelines around our coasts, and also the actual products of these offshore oil drilling has a positive effect on our atmosphere in regards to the emissions that they create. So, with my first claim being that the platforms that extract these fuels nurture local marine life and biodiversity. Now, these oil rigs, and these oil rigs in particular, not exactly the oil and the natural gas are extracted, but the rigs that are used to extract these fuels, there are a great number of these. According to the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement of the Department of the Interior, there are approximately 2,900 offshore production facilities in the outer continental shelf in the U.S. And these are regularly replenished as these deposits get depleted and we have to build new ones and get rid of old ones. Now, the costs of removing these rigs, which they have to be removed according to the regulations, is prohibitively expensive. So you'll find that the private companies that own these oil rigs have a tendency to rather repurpose them. And for what? They repurpose into reefs, artificial reefs. In the Gulf of Mexico, there's a great number of oil rigs, and as such, they can be converted into quite a large number of artificial reefs. There are the Gulf of Mexico, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration of the Department of Energy, there contributes to 23% of total U.S. production of oil in particular. And of course, the U.S. is the largest supplier of oil in the world. So you would expect there are a large number of oil rigs. Now, oil drilling rights are leased to private companies. They are not given because they are U.S. waters. And so upon expiration of these leases, or when these oil rigs are unable to be used anymore, they must be removed from the site to avoid disrupting commerce. And they must also be cleaned, so they're not going to be dumped into the ocean with all sorts of bad stuff on it. And so these reef structures, in turn, become very beneficial to the life around it because they become artificial reefs. And they can do so even before they are reefed. It is not after or before. Throughout their entire life, these oil rigs are beneficial to marine life. Now, the reason for this is because these oil rigs and supporting structures have large solid surface areas which can support large populations of aquatic life, such as coral, barnacles, and echinoderms and certain creatures such as that. And also the depths at which they operate at allow these creatures to intercept currents that are nutrient-rich, and also these same currents can sweep away sediments that may inhibit growth otherwise. This is noted by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration of the Department of Commerce, and this has been noted specifically with a particular species of coral known as Lophelia, which has seen prosperity on these oil rigs. And my second point that I will be using to support this is that the additional supply of petroleum and natural gas in the form of liquefied natural gas, which we export and import, from these offshore sources eases aggregate pollution emissions. Now this means that we will have less pollution in the environment because of this additional fuel. Now the reason for this is that the increased supply of petroleum and natural gas will inhibit the use of coal-fired plants. Now traditional economic principles would indicate that increasing the supply of oil, petroleum, and natural gas will lower the cost and increase its use. And because they are a substitute to coal, it will result in a reduction in the use of coal. So you will find that nations and countries and cities will use less coal-powered power plants. And the reason why this is good, or why this benefits the environment, is that petroleum and natural gas burning power plants pollute less per megawatt hour than their coal counterparts. Statistics from the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, compare three significant factors in these emissions from these power plants: carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen oxide. Coal generates approximately 2,200 pounds per megawatt hour of CO2, while oil generates 1,672, and natural gas half of coal of 1,135. Coal and oil generate similar amounts of sulfur dioxide, but natural gas has a negligible contribution to that. Coal generates 6 pounds per megawatt hour of nitrogen oxide, oil generates 2/3 that at 4 pounds, and natural gas less than 1/3 that at 1.7 pounds per megawatt hour. And that is a significant, although it's up to interpretation, it is a significant difference in the amount of pollution that these things contribute. And so, even though it is not the best scenario, it does not improve directly, it does indirectly improve our emissions by the adage of lesser of two evils, in which there will be less damaging effect by our power consumption. And so, because the offshore oil and natural gas extraction has a positive effect on our marine life and biodiversity, and also has a positive effect on our atmosphere in terms of emissions, we can conclude, thusly, that the offshore oil and natural gas extraction has a positive impact on our environment.
Gesundheit.
Thank you.
All right, Derek, the proposition is there. There are good secondary points there. Both the proposition and the secondary points need to be simplified so they're clearer. I think the same problem occurs when you're in the body of the speech. You have a tendency to sort of repeat an idea and a concept and explain it 3 times without simply stating what the impact of that argument is. And so you need your language needs to be edited a little bit. On that whole first point, for instance, I basically think that you said the same thing 3 different ways, and I'm still waiting for some evidence on it. The only evidence that we got on that first point, despite all the description of what you were giving us, is that the surface of these platforms is something that might promote the growth of certain kinds of species, and the only species that actually gets referred to is a particular type of coral. So I think that you need a little bit more evidence on that and a little bit less repetition about how big they are, how many of them there are. You get to that point pretty quickly, and then, like I said, I think you spin your wheels for a minute or two before you finally get to some proof on it, and I think you need a little bit more proof on that particular point. On the second point about the trade-off on evidence, on energy, that's basically the way the secondary claim ought to be phrased, that utilizing more natural gas and oil from these offshore drilling sites will allow us to trade off the use of coal, which is more damaging. That's a simpler sentence than the three explanations that you gave on that particular point. Ultimately, I think everybody understands what you're saying, but like I said, for a presentation, you need to be a little bit more direct. The evidence on that second point, I think the controversies are going to be more, not so much about whether or not oil and natural gas are less polluting than coal is. I would suspect there's probably not a lot of controversy on that particular point. The question is how much of it could actually be traded off because of either the cost issues or whether or not the utilities are tooled and fired up for utilizing those as energy generating sources. If we'd have to build new plants, for instance, that are going to use oil, gas, issues to generate the electricity, there might be a limitation on the current infrastructure that allows that to do that. If it's easy to transition from coal to the other in those plants, that's part of the argument that I think needs to be developed a little bit. There's are times when I get the feeling that you are reading instead of simply explaining to us what's going on. And I think maybe you've gotten a little bit tied up in some of the language that you're using instead of making it as straightforward as it can be. All right, thank you.